Hi there, my name is Jeremy Brown with Geist Interactive. Today we're going to take a look at the in-product add-ons. In this latest update of Claris FileMaker 19.1.2, we are now given 9 add-ons that we can use in our custom apps. These add-ons work just as they're supposed to work, and very many people are using them already in their custom apps. But I wanted to walk through each of the parts of an add-on and help you understand more about how these work. By the end of this session, I would like you to leave fully knowledgeable about these add-ons. You probably will not access this knowledge very often, but if you do, you know where to look. So our agenda today is to talk through the various segments, parts of these add-ons that would be very useful for a FileMaker developer. We're going to take a look at how add-ons work generally, just the universal principles behind them. We're going to talk about how to filter the data from the main found set. We're going to actually talk about also refining the find and just looking at that find script. We're going to talk about how the add-ons refresh data and how you can force a refresh anytime. We'll take a look at multiple instances, that is, using the same add-on multiple times in a file or on a layout. Configuring an add-on is very important, and we'll address how the configurator works and how to get it to point to your data. We'll also take a look at events, the add-on's events. We'll take a look at the required fields of each add-on. And finally, we'll look at how some add-ons automatically refetch the data at a certain interval. So here is our agenda for today. Now, our audience is many different FileMaker developers. These are the people that want these to work and are already using them, but want to know a little bit more about how to customize them on this FileMaker scripting side even more. We won't be able to customize the JavaScript code, but the scripting we can take a look at and do a lot of interesting customizations for our particular app. As I explain each of the topics in this series, I'm going to use our LedgerLink product sample file. Now, this is a free file to download, so I'm not plugging it in any way. You can take a look at the work that I've done with LedgerLink and see how I have incorporated these add-ons into that product or that file. So you don't have to pay for a subscription to be able to download it. In some cases, I'm going to just start with a blank file because it's nice to isolate some things away from other stuff. But I will, of course, always talk about how to bring it back into your own custom app. So let's get started. Now we'll take a look at the find mechanism that's built into each of the add-ons. The find mechanism was built so that a particular add-on could go to your source table and return a found set of data to put into the web viewer. For the calendar, for example, it's going to find about 4 or 5 months worth of data and push it into the web viewer. The Kanban board will find all of the data and push it in there as well. So you can rely on this find mechanism to go and find the data anytime you need to refresh the data. And we'll take a look at how to refresh it later on. But you may want to go into this script and adjust it and add particular constraints to the find. So we'll take a look at that. Just a couple more notes. This find mechanism uses the new execute FileMaker data API script step to return a found set of records as JSON. And that makes sense because these add-ons need JSON because they're JavaScript, and it just was a good way to get the data from your FileMaker table to the web viewer. So now let's go take a look at the find mechanism. So let's take a look and see how you can update the find mechanism of any of the add-ons. So I'm going to go into the script workspace and I'm going to find the Kanban board's find mechanism. That is found in the event handlers. So we have the Kanban find, and I just want to walk through this script with you and maybe give suggestions about how it works. about how you can change it. So the first thing right off the bat at the very top is you cannot change the name of this script. This is called by the JavaScript, and so we want to make sure that the JavaScript knows which script it is. The JavaScript sends a JSON payload to this script as a parameter, and you can see it down here, and this is the description of what it is. Most of this is internal for the find to work, and some of it's not even used, but it is a common pattern you'll see throughout here. The data variable is actually going to be a query that comes in from the JavaScript. So the JavaScript has written a query, and it comes in, and it's part of it's used in the find. The callback is a function that will call back to the add-on, and it's used down at the bottom here. The config is what's stored in the configuration for this particular add-on, which is found in the add-ons table, and we'll talk about that in the configurator video. And of course, it brings in the UUID of this instance. This is very important. It tells the JavaScript, it actually tells this script which add-on to do the find on, to perform the find. So we get it down here, and it's used. We get the name of the web viewer object. This is one of those private scripts that you wouldn't really change, and it's just used to get the name. Down here in line 38, I'm going to skip lines 28 through 35 and talk about those in the filter video, but line 38 here is where we start to work with the data. You can see that the data variable is used in the execute FileMaker Data API script step. So it is a query that is generated. I'm going to run this. I'm going to run this from here. In fact, it should just run itself eventually. So there we go. And now we get the data back. So I'm going to pause it there. And here's the data. This is actually the query that the JavaScript wrote. It took out from the configurator, it took out the name of the layout that we want to find on. And it took out some of the other fields. Like here, we're going to do a sort of the field. We're going to sort by the priority field in that layout. And we've got the ID field here as well. So all this was generated by the JavaScript from the configuration and is available here. Now, okay, I'll just keep on going and then we'll talk through the rest of it. Config, again, this is all of the information that you as the developer set into the configurator to make it work and to point fields to the different parts of the add-on. We get the name. Again, I'm going to skip the filtering for a moment and come to line 38. There we go. Just run that through. There we go. So now it's going to use this data variable to execute the FileMaker Data API and get the results back in a variable there, and we can see that here. So here's the information. There's some error trapping to make sure that we actually, there was no error here, that we were able to do the find correctly, and then it takes the remainder of the script, takes the result back, sends it back to the JavaScript, and runs the find and re-renders the data part of the add-on. So again, if anybody was adding records here, we could see it regenerate here. If I go to the actual place here and I create a new record, let's just go to the detail, create a new record, and say Emily, customer. There we go. And eventually we've got it added and we're ready to go. So here is the new task. And eventually it'll show up over here. See that? That's pretty cool. Now you can force a refresh, and we'll talk about that in a future video. Now, the only thing you would really want to do with this script is to override the find the data query in some way. As this runs, we get the query back from the JavaScript, and this is set up in just a normal query, a normal JSON object. You could easily overwrite any of this. So maybe you only want to return 10 records or 3,000 records. Maybe you want to sort it a different way than what is configured here by default. And this actually is hard-coded into the JavaScript. You won't be able to change that. But you could easily come in here and change it to descending for some reason. So, or you could add more to the query. You could add a whole nother element to the query that further limits the returned records. So this is the only place you would really want to change anything. Everything else should be just left alone. But I wanted to explain how this find mechanism works. In most cases, you won't mess with it. The data variable would be the only thing that you would want to mess with. However, add-ons are created with a built-in filtering mechanism that you can use. And in the next section, we'll take a look at that. Along with the find mechanism, you can apply a filter to the data so that you can provide some user interface-based way of filtering the data. Filtering the data does require a little bit of setup. It requires a couple extra fields, but that's easily handled. And what it will do is it will return a subset of the data from the source table. So instead of, say, the Kanban board returning all of the data from that table, you can filter the found set to be just the records for employee Jeremy, for example. You can pretty much do what you want with this filtering mechanism, and I want to show you exactly how that's done. So let's go take a look. By default, the add-ons return all of the records in the found set. If there were 100 records in this time activities table, 100 records would be shown in their assigned columns. But we may not want all of the records to be returned. You could change the find as we showed in a previous video, but another way to handle this is through the filtering mechanism that is built into the add-ons. I want to explain how this works. Inside the configurator, there is a filter section. Now bear with me here. This allows you to pick a field in your layout, in your table, source table, that you want to search in. And it allows you to pick a field in which the search criteria will be placed. Okay, does that make sense? You pick a field here that you want to do a search, just like in a regular find when we could enter a query into any of these, and we can do a find in that field. This is a field that will accept a find criteria as text, and then used in the query. So let me show you that. This may not make sense. Let me show you that. First thing I'm going to do is, because I'm in this sort of dashboard global context, I'm going to add a query field. I'm going to make it a text, and I'm just going to make it a global field. It's a field with global storage. Okay. And I'm going to place that on this layout. That kind of makes sense. It seems to make sense for me. Maybe there's some instances where you want to hide this field. You can just push it off to the left. Now I'm going to go to the layout that I'm using in this Kanban board, the activity detail, which I have at the bottom. And I'm going to add a field that I want to search in. There's a billable indicator. I want to put that in here. And I want to then search for any records that are billable. So billable is just a number field, and it contains either a 1 or nothing. So what we'll do is we'll look for the trues or the ones. So let's go and do that. All right, so now we're going to go into the configurator, and we're going to go back to the filter and say, I want you to search in my sourced data table. I want you to search into this field, and I want you to use this field that is on this layout. So this global query field needs to be on the layout in the context of your Kanban board or your add-on. Okay? So now, if I put in a 1 here, and the find will happen, I'm now only seeing those that are billable. If I click on this and change this to nothing and close it, now it goes away. So this filtering mechanism allows me to see that which makes sense here. Now, I don't think this is going to work because 0 is different than empty. So I'm going to have to go back to these and find the empty records and change this to 0. And replace field contents. There we go. All right, so now when I do that, it probably happened too fast, but now I have the unbilled ones. Now it just happens that they have the equal amount. So let's go in here and change this back to billable. There we go. So now we have 2 records that are not billable and 4 records that are billable. Okay, so this works nicely, but 0 and 1 isn't a very good way for people to enter the data and choose which they want to see. So I'm going to take this opportunity to update the find script to handle true and false, meaning 1 and 0. So I want to give the users the ability to change this themselves. So I'm going to change this field, this query field, to a pop-up control. And I have a value list that says true, false. All right, so now they can enter true, and hopefully we'll see all of the billable ones. Since FileMaker doesn't have a Boolean like this, we just use 1 and 0s in a number field. We need to adjust the find script to handle this a little bit. So we go in here into this find script, and right in here near the top, we look and see that here's where the filtering happens. So part of the configuration says, what field are you wanting to search in? That's what this is right here. So if there's a value in there, that is, if you're using the filter mechanism, then go ahead and grab the value in the query field and then use that as part of the query. So this is adding the filtering mechanism to the query. And you can see that here. Okay. And you're welcome to walk through it and see that here. And we can do that in a second. But what I want to do is I want to update the query value to be true or false, to be 0 or 1. What's in the value of this is the words true or false. That's what's here. We want to turn that into 1 or 0. And so what I want to do is update this query value to be 1 or 0. So I'm just going to overwrite it and say if query value equals true 1, otherwise 0. All right, let's see if that works. So now we will let there we go. All right, so it looks like it's working. So I change that and it refreshes to show just the false ones. I'll show you what this is doing. Let it run. So we'll go all the way down to here. So in this section, the scripting logic runs like this. Oh, you have something in the search field. That means you want to apply the query to some field in the data table. So I'm going to grab the query field here. I'm going to get the value of it, and then I'm going to turn it, in this case, I'm going to turn it into a 1 because it's true. The next step here, line 35, actually adds this query to the data, to the original query. Here's the first query. Here's the one that came in from JavaScript. And in that next step, it added this right here. It added billable indicator 1 and then all of them. So this is a and. So it's basically saying, give me all of them and the ones with the true billable. There we go. All right, so now that runs and we can let users manipulate what they see, or of course they can, you can put this off screen and set this programmatically in various other ways. Now, again, I'm clicking on it. I'm waiting for the find to happen on its own, but we can actually add a refresh to this field, and we'll do that in the next section. Many of the add-ons have a built-in refresh mechanism so that you can refresh the data at your insistence. You can tell the web viewer to refresh itself whenever you want, such as a script or a timer or something that you want to do to cause it to refresh. In many cases, this refreshing goes right along with the filtering that we saw previously. So we'll take a look at how this refreshing of data works. Each add-on is built with a refresh capability. That means anytime you want, you can cause it to refresh. Most add-ons already at a certain interval do a refetching of the data, and we can see that here. If I change this query to false and I just wait for a little while, it will eventually reset the web viewer with new data. Now, it's a long interval, and it may not be practical for everything you're doing. Someone can activate it by clicking in the web viewer, or we can force a refresh. And in fact, that's what I would recommend. Anytime you want to change the data here, you would want to build a refresh. So the way we do that is we use the script that's called refresh. So if I do that, there's a lot of refreshes in this sample file, but I'm going to use the Kanban refresh. So the Kanban refresh is built to get the UUID out of the JSON object, get the name of the web viewer object, and then run a JavaScript function that refreshes the data. That refresh automatically triggers a new find, and it runs the query and the find that we've done already, we've talked about already. So there's nothing more you need to do except for cause this to run. Now it is asking for a script parameter of a JSON object. And that JSON object is easiest found in the configurator button here. So we've got a configurator button here, and it contains a JSON object. This JSON object contains the unique ID of this add-on. Remember, a unique ID is generated as you drag them out onto a layout. So I'm just going to copy this and go to this query field, and I'm going to add a script trigger to it that runs on, let's do on modify. I think that's fairly typical. Kanban refresh, and I'm going to paste in the parameter. So this parameter will pass in the add-on UUID, and that's really all you have to do. So let's see if this works. So every time I modify this, the script runs, and immediately the data gets refreshed. There's no flashing, it's just suddenly things are new and different. That's pretty interesting. We can see that in the script debugger. We run it, that script runs, and then immediately this script causes the find to run, which does all the work of refreshing the data in the screen. So there you go. That is using the refresh mechanism. You can use that anywhere, on any layout, on any control here or button here. You can use it on the script, like on enter if you want. You can put it on timer if you want. But there's a lot of possibilities with this, and it makes it very easy to refresh the web viewer add-on. One of the big advantages of these add-ons is that you can use multiple instances of them inside your app or even on the same layout. That's done through a process using a UUID. Each add-on is given a unique identifier, and it is used to tell the script set which add-on to manipulate. So if you have two timers on the same layout, you can use the UUID to match it up, configure it with different fields, and have whole different styling. Each instance of the add-on can be unique in data, source, and styling. So let's take a look at how you can use multiple add-ons in the same layout. Each add-on is built to be able to use it multiple times in a file or even on a layout. You can pull the same instance of an add-on multiple times, and each one of them will work independently, as you can see here. For simplicity's sake, I have two timers on here. One has a blue button, one has a red button with a white background, and they are each attached to different fields. And they are running independently. This is pretty useful in a lot of circumstances where you may have multiple Kanban boards on a large layout, or multiple photo galleries, whatever the case may be. You have the option of using many of these add-ons throughout. This all happens because of the add-on's unique ID. Go into layout mode and I take a look at the add-on. As I dragged this add-on out, a unique ID was generated for this instance. Not only is it in here in the web viewer calculation, but it's actually attached to the button as well as a script parameter. If this add-on had other buttons on there, then they too would contain the add-on UUID. In fact, if I install the calendar, just as a quick example, and bring it in here, each of these buttons contains the same add-on UUID that was generated in the code, in the web viewer calculation. And if you're interested in understanding how that works, you can read about creating add-ons at geistinteractive.com. But we don't really need to worry about how this is generated because we know it's generated and we know it can be used. So this allows me to have 2 simultaneous or 100 different add-ons on the same layout. Now, this happened again, let me show you, when I dragged it onto the layout. A unique ID is generated. I could do this 100 times, and every single one of them has a different unique ID. That's really useful because for 2 reasons. Number one, when a timer is installed, when an add-on is installed, its script package is only installed one time. So I click on the plus button, I install something, and its script package is installed one time. But using multiple instances of these, so the scripts have to know, since the script is installed one time, the script package is since the script package is installed one time, whatever I do with it, such as click on this button here or this button, the scripts have to know which add-on I'm working with. So in this case, I'm working with the CA777 add-on, and this one I'm working with the 47E0. So every script passes the add-on UUID into the script. We can see that here in the show configurator. And it tells this script, all right, they want to work with this add-on. They want to configure that they want to work with this particular add-on. Add-ons are also given the name with that UUID. So in this case, this one is named timer, and then it runs out the UUID there in the name. And we can see that actually, we could see that over in objects group right there. So now we see that one, and we see the other one right here. In the scripting, then we can tell the script which add-on we're using, which instance of the JavaScript code we want to run. So this is very useful for allowing multiple. Now, not only does the add-on UUID tell the scripts which web viewer to use, it also helps me, it also tells the script which configuration to work with. I'm going to create a new layout here on the timer, and I'm going to do HTML and just create a quick layout. I'm going to drag over the config store. The config store is a text field. The add-on UUID is not only useful for the scripting and for the naming, but also for the configuration. Notice that these two are differently configured. They're attached to different fields, and they're styled differently. That's because we have an idea called a config store in the timers table. We've got a text field here called config store, and I'm going to bring that up in the data viewer. And I'll do a JSON format elements. And we can see here that we've got a huge JSON object that stores this is the config store. This holds the configuration for each of the add-ons. So you can see here in this case that I've got an add-on timer that has a red styling with the button and a background of white, and it is identified by the UUID. So there's a particular custom function that reaches into this config store, and it pulls out the particular config for the add-on with which you're working. And then thus the JavaScript can know how to render the button, render the background, which fields to use, and so forth. So this UUID is very important because it stores the because it identifies the configuration, and of course it's working with the scripting for each one of these. So I hope you so use these. I'm interested to see how people use multiple instances of these add-ons in their custom apps. The in-product Claris FileMaker add-ons just work. And when you install them, they actually install with sample data to show you how they, quote, just work. However, you will need to do a little bit of work to set them up to make them fit your data. So we built a configurator, we call it, that allows you to point this add-on and each instance of an add-on to different sets of data. We've already looked at the configurator in previous sections, but now we're going to give it its full attention. You can use this configurator to point to a different layout, different data, different fields. You can put in different settings and so forth. We'll study some configurations and see how it works. Each add-on comes with a configurator, a way to configure the data, configure the styling for a particular add-on. Here I have a Kanban add-on, and we've looked at this before. it's working with the query field. And this was all set up via the configurator. So the configurator is this button over here. I'm going to open it up, and each of the add-ons configurators provides some of the same information as well as different things for each add-on. In this case, every add-on starts by asking for some required information. You need to have a source layout. This is the layout from which the data will come, that is the context. And you need to have particular fields. In this case, the Kanban board needs just two things. It needs the primary key field, and it needs it needs something in here. It could be customer name, it could really be anything, but it just needs something. So the configurator helps me to decide how this add-on will render my data and what data to render. So we've got the required here. In very many cases, we have some optional fields where you can add or remove information here. Like I could take away the description, and then it just becomes a simple card here. So we have the optional, and we also possibly have some settings. In this case, we have simple colorings and stylings and the ability to drag or not drag the cards. So here I've turned that off so it can't be dragged. So a FileMaker developer can come in here and set up the configuration how she wants. I won't go into the details of this Kanban one. We'll explore that in other blog posts and other information. But the configurator is good for you to know about. The information that's in this configuration is stored as part of this add-ons config store. If I go to the Kanban layout, I'm going to go to this Kanban configurator because it has the context that I want. And I open up the web viewer, the data viewer, and I look at the config store here. You will see that this field contains the configuration that I have set up for this instance of the add-on. This is the UUID of the add-on, and it identifies the configuration. Every time you run a script, every time you click on a card, this configuration is used somehow in the JavaScript. For example, in this case, it's telling me which layout is the layout that the script will open up when a card is clicked. Tell me about which, here, the card draggable, I turned that off, so now the value is false. And the JavaScript code uses the data in here to render the add-on as it is required. So the configuration is available for a FileMaker developer. Now, I personally think, this is just my opinion, but I personally think once you've got the configuration solved, you can take this field, this button, and just either set it off screen or delete it entirely. This is not needed for most folks. It is set to hide when there is no privilege set or when the device is iOS. All right, so I think that's all we need to really know about the configurator. So use the configurator to change how you want it to render and what data you want it to render so that this add-on becomes custom to your needs. Each add-on has events that are tailored to how that add-on works. For example, double-clicking on a calendar event will show that event in a FileMaker layout. The photo gallery has a similar event where you would click on it and it would open up that photo. The heat map has events in that you can scroll through the months of the events and so forth. So we'll take a look at the event handling mechanism that's built in and just give you some ideas about what more you could do with it. Each add-on is built with events. And those events are controlled by the JavaScript, which passes that off to a FileMaker script as well. So let's take a look at the different events. Obviously, each add-on is going to have a different set of events. This calendar, for example, has an event where I scroll through the months, where I go to today. I can change the view type, and I can add a new event. I can also click on event if I wanted to. Let's go back to month view and click on that and open that up. And finally, I can double click on a blank space, create a new event. So there's a lot of events to this calendar, and each add-on has different amounts of events. Whatever the events are, you can find them in the event script. So let's go to the events script. We're going to do calendar events. And you can see here a rather long script with some logic built in. And I want to just go over this quickly here so that you know what to look for. As with other event scripts, you do not want to change the name of this. The name of this script is what the JavaScript knows, and we'll look for this in the script workspace. You also get a JSON object back, and you get some information. In this case, the script parses out the various parts of the JSON object into separate variables, and the data in these variables is used throughout this script. The rest of this script is just taking a look at what the event is and using some conditional logic to do parts of the script if under certain conditions. For example, if the event type variable is event click, and you can see their comments here, then it's going to run this code. If it's view state changed, event dropped, and so forth. So you as a FileMaker developer can go in here and you can update what is done in this script to do something different than what is done by default. In many of these events, information from this data variable is used. For example, here we've got a variable, a script step that sets a variable that pulls something out of the data, that pulls out the display layout, the layout that you're going to open as a card window, and you can see that here. So that's part of the data that's gathered, that's sent from the JavaScript. So this is the event script, and you can come in here, like I've said, and update this to do anything you would like, as long as you understand where that is. We won't get into details about how to update the calendar events one. We can explore those in later documentation, but I just wanted to point this script out to you. All of the add-ons require fields in the source data's table. And we'll take a look at that here. It's important to have these in your source table so that you can easily pick them on the configurator and then have that data render in the add-on. Let's take a look at all of the different add-ons and their required fields. Each of the add-ons that are in the Claris FileMaker platform have required fields that are necessary for it to work. That is, they're necessary because it will know which fields to render in the add-on. In this timer's case, we can look at the configurator and we can see that it has 3 required fields: a time logged field, a total time field, and a number field. And it even tells you what kind of field it is. So this is important to have in the table from which the data comes. We need to have these 3 fields in that table, and we need to have those 3 fields on the target layout that we are working with. So in this case, my layout that the timer is on is all the add-ons, and I've got 3 fields on this layout. I actually have them off. Well, I have 2 of them on the layout, and then I have a third one off the screen. But that's perfectly okay. All of the fields could be off screen, and the configurator will be able to use them. We have written about this, and I just want to show you this. At geistinteractive.com, we've written about all of the fields that are required for each of the add-ons. So in this case, again, the timer is these 3 fields right here. What I recommend when you install is that you use the fields inside the sample data table. The sample data of the timer has these 3 fields, and those are the required ones. And so you could easily copy and paste these into your source tables, any of your tables, to get the required fields that you need. So I would take some time to study the sample data table that comes in before you start creating your own. That way you just know which you need to use. Let's just take a look at one more quick. We're going to look at the photo gallery here, and we'll go into browse mode. We'll set up the configurator here, and we can see now this one actually has 4 fields that are required. So you just need to provide a field for each one of these in your source table. Some of the add-ons have a automatic refetching of the data. That means when you're just staring at the Kanban board, for example, and someone across the office enters a new event, a new card to be put on the board, it will show up on your board as well. So this is pretty cool, and we're going to take a look at how the add-ons refetch their data automatically. Many of the add-ons have a built-in refetching of the data, and I think I've demonstrated that in other videos, but I want to call it out here. On my screen here, I have 2 kinds of add-ons. I have the timer and I have a photo gallery. Now the timer add-ons are just a record-based add-on, so they don't actually refresh themselves on their own. The photo gallery add-on is one I would call a dashboard one, where it can be where the data can come from any context, and this can be in a full screen view. But the photo gallery does do its own refreshing, and I just want to show you that. I'm just going to let it sit here. This may take some time. But the idea is that at any point, at some interval, this photo gallery will refresh itself, will go get the new data, or the same data for that matter, and it will put it into the calendar. Sometimes there's a very long interval. I think each add-on has a little bit different one, and it's not configurable, but at some point, this will refresh on its own. And that's good, because you could be sitting here for quite a while, and you could want to see the new records that come in to the photo table, and this render in this layout. So just know that the data gets refreshed once in a while, and there it goes. So now we have it running on its own to do the find and to refetch the data. All right, that's it. It's really simple to know. Just be aware that many add-ons do a refetching of the data. I hope you enjoyed learning more about these add-ons, everything that you can do with them. Again, they'll just work, and that's okay. But if you want to dig in, the different sections here have provided you with a lot of information about it. And you can always turn to geistinteractive.com/blog and read more about each of these sections. All right, well, thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing how you're using these add-ons and what clever things you do with them. Thank you.